Hi, good morning. It's Jim from maverickstar Observatory. Guys, just thought I'd let you know I'm still here. I know things have been a bit quiet over the last couple of days, but we're pretty much in limp mode here at the observatory. The equipment is still running in the background. Every 3 seconds we're collecting data on the position of the magnetic North Pole, and we're about 6 or so days away from doing an update on the position. We're still ticking over with the magnetosphere readings as well every 15 minutes. But pretty much just like you guys, it's been a bit of a strange start to the new year. And, I don't mind sharing what I've been doing over the last few days. I mean, I'm addicted to science in any case, and there's not one day really goes by without me thinking of something to do with along the lines of science or, how to improve things here at the observatory. And, I've been focusing on that back burner project that we've got going, with the magnetic motor. And I've sort of after doing a few tests on that, decided, this really isn't where we need to be going. We need to do something new. So I'd written down a few different methods of the way we generate electricity. But pretty much all of them require some form of force or not. But I will say this. For the last 150 years, we've pretty much used the same method, and that is by either using wind, solar, hydro, nuclear, or coal burning power plants to turn turbines in order to turn magnets to create a magnetic field which stimulates the movement of electrons so that we can tap those for electricity as we do. And, I've just written down lots of different methods of how we can do that, but pretty much all of them required a force. So, if we look at quartz crystal, I don't know if you're aware of this, but if you put pressure on a quartz crystal, at the other end, you will knock the electrons out of it. And as soon as that pressure releases, it's like a sponge. It absorbs ambient electrons to, fulfill its outer electron shells within the molecular makeup of quartz crystal. So it acts like a sponge. You squeeze it, electrons come out, so electricity can be used. You let it go, it absorbs it. This is the same thing for the coils, the way in which they work, which is the majority of the way we get our electricity. The magnetic material comes past the coil, and it almost applies a force to the coil which encourages the electrons to flow, and we tap that for electricity. If it keeps happening, we get a regular amount of electricity which we can run our electrical devices off. Another one you probably aren't aware of is a piezo crystal. Now this is something similar to quartz crystal. You can bend it, but as you bend it, it lights an LED. I'll have to demonstrate a few of these things for you so you get an idea where we're coming from. But again, a force has to be applied, and like the sponge, in all these cases, you wring the sponge out of water or electrons in this case, you let it go, it absorbs more, and you keep squeezing and squeezing like the coil or the quartz crystal or the piezo, you get the electrons out. But it always requires that effort to squeeze or press or put some form of force on in order for you to do it. Another one is a Peltier element. You can connect these up to electricity and they go to sub-zero temperatures very quickly. But if you apply heat, you can get the electricity out of a Peltier element. The problem is, after a certain point, it fails because the Peltier element overheats. So if you can keep it cold with water jacket on one side and hot on the other, you can continue to produce electricity. But again, some form of force in the region of radiation or heat has to be applied. Solar power, again, is another force. There is something hitting the solar panel in the form of photons, and that photons are being converted through the silica material in the photovoltaic panel, and it is converted into electricity. Same thing with nuclear power. Now, okay, so we've got all these, but in general, guys, the way we create electricity is with coils. Yeah, it doesn't matter regarding of the force we apply to get that electricity to keep squeezing the sponge where we get the water out or we get the electrons out. It requires a force, and some of the methods we've come up with, more recently, probably over the last, I don't know, 90 years, would be wind power, hydropower, nuclear power, solar panel, coal power. We've even tried to tap the waves of the sea because they perform a force, as the tide goes in and out, and the waves go up and down. You get a force applied. So that's another way in which we can tap the the sponge for the electrons, if you want. One of the methods I've tried in the past is frequency. Now, okay, it's an electrical force. As soon as you start converting a frequency into electrical power to run it through a speaker or run it through a coil, as I've done, or a series of coils bound together, what happens is the one that you've got connected to the power supply that is allowing the amplitude of the frequency, whichever one you choose to select. And I've had a lot of experience in this. If you've watched some of the previous videos, we've managed to, just by introducing magnets in little glass tubes, get them to rotate at very high speeds just by increasing slowly the attenuation of the frequency. So as we bring up the frequency, so like 1 hertz per second is boom, boom, boom. As you increase the frequency, you go boom, 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 and at some point you'll go into about 1500 hertz. It starts to sound different to the beating. You get like a boo, and you've probably heard these frequencies before. Here in the UK, we used to have this test screen at the end of the evening on ITV, if you remember, that little girl with a puppet. It was freaky, but you used to get that boo noise at the end, and it was like, I suppose it was to wake people up if they'd left the TV on and fell asleep in front of it, but I'm not 100% sure. But it would be a test screen anyhow. So yeah, one of the things I managed to do is, by wrapping multiple coils around the one that was active, had the frequency in it, I found that by some form of induction, the frequency would leak out into the other coils, and you could tap those for their electricity as well. Something else that we've got a constant force of, and the reason why we're talking about this now is because wind is a constant force so long as it's blowing. Hydro is a constant force so long as there's water pushing past the turbines. Nuclear is a constant force where two materials are coming together, and through them coming together they are producing heat, and in turn steam, and we tap that steam to run a turbine, in turn run a coil with magnets flying past it and produce the electricity. Solar power is a force. Coal burning plants is a force. Again, we use coal burning power plants to produce steam, turns the turbine, we get electricity out of it. Wave is not something that's so commonly used, but again, through the movement of the waves oscillating, that movement can be converted into energy, which we can use. But one of the other ones that hasn't seemed to have been tried yet, as far as I'm aware, and I will give a couple of examples of perhaps where it's been close to being used, is gravity. We've got a constant force of 9.8 meters per second of gravitational force pulling mass down on the floor, and I was just thinking, how could we convert that into perhaps an energy where we can get the electrons out. We can get that constant force to keep constantly squashing something, or maybe we turn it off, then we reactivate it, and we get a pulse, just similar to heating that quartz crystal or bending that piezo crystal, or moving a magnet past the coil. We get that constant force, and then we interrupt the force, and then we get it again. You could set this up so that it constantly produce electricity, but there's the big but. How do we tap that? Now, I have seen people use clockwork radios with weights, and you could say that was harnessing gravity, because the gravity is what keeps the spring wanting to flick that little bit over each time a pendulum goes past, if you like, and you get the the energy out of that mass reaching down low to the surface of the earth. If you do a bit of research, you'll get where I'm coming from, but that really is one of the methods. I think people would argue, yes, it's using gravity as a force to obtain electricity. I think there was a guy that invented a radio within the last 20 years that was famous for that, the clockwork radio. But in essence, it did use the force of gravity to pull the weight down to keep the spring moving. But if we could come up with another method, I think that is the way forward. I've got to say this, there is another way that I haven't mentioned, and I will do, is fusion. I don't think they're ever going to get it working, no matter how much they spend on it. It requires extremes amount of energy to obtain, a very few seconds at best. I think the longest they've managed to get it running is less than 2 minutes, and it isn't sustaining without the huge amount of energy that it's required to contain plasma in the fusion reactor. So I don't think we're ever going to be producing electricity with fusion in the future. We need something else, guys. We've been using coils for the main part of our energy requirements, either through wind, hydro, nuclear, solar or coal or wave or etc. And it all seems to be revolving round magnets moving past coils in order to, convert that efficiency of the wind or the hydropower into a form of electricity for us to use. So I think we need to come up with something new, and for that reason I'm going to look into other areas of that. And at the moment, I've got the benefit of doing that because there's not a lot going on with the observatory. We're not raising great deals of money, and things are pretty much drawn to a great halt, despite the campaign before Christmas to encourage people to jump on board and support us. It's pretty much reduced to almost nothing. So I don't know what to do, other than just keep my eyes open and observe what's going on. And as far as what I can see, what is going on is nothing too dissimilar to what was happening in the early 1900s before the Second World War, with this constant attack on freedoms of speech, freedoms of information. And clearly we saw with the Donald Trump incident in DC a few days ago, we saw these big organisations like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram come together to suppress even his freedom of speech. And I don't think even Donald Trump deserves to have his freedom of speech cut, because I think that is a quality and a privilege that we should all enjoy, no matter what it is we're saying. You have the right at the end of the day to choose whether you want to listen to somebody. You don't need a state government to tell you what you should be listening to. And I just watched all the mainstream media jump on him over this incident and blow it completely out of proportion. And I know in America at the moment is torn into two halves, half supporting Biden, half supporting Donald Trump. But when we see the mechanisms of the dark forces come out to attack somebody and withdraw their freedom of speech, you have to ask, why are they doing that? And what is the agenda behind it? I think pretty much most of us have got a good clue if we've been active over the last few years trying to source out the reality of what it's like to be actually awake. And what do I mean by that? It's not something everyone wants, and I've described it as having a nice deep sleep in a warm bed in a cold environment, and nobody wants that warmth of the blankets pulled off them, or the quilt pulled off them, or the duvet, and exposing to the cold. But the cold is the truth. We live in terrorism. When people are classified as domestic terrorists for protesting, and rioters and hooligans and things like this, when they are clearly just trying to protest and get their point across. When we start abolishing the right to protest, we really move into a different era, and I feel that we are moving into that. And on a biblical term, I think we're in the times of Sodom and Gomorrah. I think we've really upset God. I really do. I don't know how you feel about that, but if you've ever read the Bible and you've read Sodom and Gomorrah and you take a look around right now, you could easily say that you was back in those times, and the only thing that we are waiting for is the wrath of God to punish us for our behaviours, and it will come soon. I believe that that is what all this is about. I believe that that is why nature has taken its approach and, you know, is the way it is right now. You see, what we don't understand, guys, is there is bigger forces out there that even scientists like myself can even comprehend or understand. You know, if we detach ourselves from what we think we can do in the first place, which is impossible, if we think we are not part of nature and we are allowed to detach from it, then there needs to be a big wake-up call to that very fact, that we do influence the rest of nature through our behaviour. One of those ways we can influence nature is by pollution. You know, I reckon we also throw things out of balance through just our behaviour. And, you know, you've only got to look into the biblical textbooks and you'll see that every time there has been great disasters of floods, Sodom and Gomorrah, and what was promised in the tribulation times, there will be behaviours of people that will be very rife, and that is wicked, corruption, greed. And then we have the other behaviours that was witnessed in Sodom and Gomorrah, with, you know, men sleeping with men, women with women, and man with animals. You know, it was a disgrace to God, and it was destroyed according to that book. You know, again, this behaviour turned up before that in Noah's time, and it was the same reasons. If you've read the book, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it was promised that there would come a time in the future where that would happen again. Big thing that I always think about during these periods of times that have happened in the Bible, and the one that is promised right now, is that there will be very few people chosen to serve God at that point in time, and the rest will have to live in the days of, you know, perhaps a life of wickedness, corruption, surrounded by what most people would consider, you know, the attitudes of those that belong in hell. And it's not an attitude which most of us would want to associate with, but that is, you know, in my interpretation of hell, what hell is. It's people sharing an attitude which you wouldn't want to associate with: wickedness, corruption, murdering, raping, killing, and stealing. You know, that, in my view, is hell. I mean, I don't think you people would want to live in a city where this was allowed to happen. But slowly, this is what we are emerging into. You know, world governments that can murder other civilizations at the drop of a hat. You know, go to war with them, kill women, children, and elderly people. You know, the thing is with bombs is they're not discriminative. They don't say, well, we will explode in this region and only kill soldiers. Unfortunately, smart bombs are not that smart. You know, they destroy anything in the vicinity of the blast. And if that is children asleep peacefully in their beds, then that is what happens. This is the world which we're merging into. And these are some of the thoughts that I've been having recently. You know, we will continue in some form of fashion to, you know, continue to do the Pole Shift News. It is a real shame that people can't see, other than, you know, the fact that we talk about topics like we have in this video. You know, there is a lot of work that goes on in the background, and it is deserving of a bit of support. But, you know, it's a massive effort for people to do it these days. I'm just sitting here over the last few days, just, I suppose it's like on a run. You know, you hit the wall and you feel like, you know, you just want to sit down on the nearest bench and walk home. Not run the rest of the way home, just walk home. You know, you feel like giving up. Guys, I will mention the link down there below if you want to help support what we do at the observatory, if you think it's worthwhile, it's not mandatory, it's entirely up to you. You have to make the effort to do that. Sorry, I can't do that for you. It's something you have to do. And we'll continue to ponder the thoughts on alternative energy, because I think that that's something that we're going to need in the future with energy bills increasing. I think we need to look in new areas. That's where I'm going with that, and come up with some completely new idea of producing electricity, another way of squeezing that sponge. But meantime, you take care of yourselves. Link down there if you want to support us, and I'll catch up in a few days, guys. As always, take it easy. Bye for now.